is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
We're barely bowl eligible here on KCSN on the always draft season channel here, presented by KC Sports Network. We are talking college football here, your college football podcast, everything college football here from Matt Lane and myself. Matty, how was your week 2 of college football? Some great games, a good slate, a little bit different from this week, but a great slate from last week.
Yeah, no, it was phenomenal, and it kind of led you perfectly into the NFL. So like college football last week, I don't want to say calm down, but you got a little bit cleaner college football. It wasn't just pure raw chaos like it was in week 1, and you got a couple good games. You got everything you wanted to see, and that kind of perfectly led you into the NFL starting up last week. So like it was a great time for football. Like we are now fully in the swing of things. NFL's going, college football settling down. We're only a week to 2 weeks away from getting, we got some this week, just interconference matchups. So I thought it was good. What about you, Tuck? Did you enjoy last week of college football?
I really did enjoy last week. We had some
sweating out the Missouri game.
The tradition unlike any other, Matthew. Sweating out a Missouri game in week 2
against Middle Tennessee
against an FCS team. They're FBS. I should be fair. They're FBS. But they do have Memphis coming up. Mizzou does. We'll talk about Mizzou a little bit later. That's part of it. But Memphis looked not good against Navy. Either Navy's really good or Memphis is not very good. But I was impressed by the Navy offense. They were slinging that thing. They were slinging it a little bit. I know we're talking week 3 a little bit. I was watching the Navy game. I think Miami played within Cookman, and
Miami's back. Listen, Miami, USC, Texas, Florida State, everyone's back. It's the year of everyone being back. But hey, we're here.
We are here indeed. Colorado came out and had a big statement against Nebraska. Colorado, Maddie, I guess we could just start with this. It's seeming like this is going to be this podcast team.
Yeah. Last year it became pretty evident pretty quickly that TCU was going to be our team. And, they did this well. This year, I don't expect the same thing out of Colorado. I don't expect Colorado to go play in the national championship game. However, they are undoubtedly the team of barely bowl eligible right now. And just about everybody, if you're a college football fan and you don't have an allegiance to a team right now, you're picking Colorado. We don't have to beat around the bush. We don't have to lie. You like Colorado. You like Deion. You like everything they have going on. And it's just fun. You get a post-game presser from Deion, which is usually great. You get some kind of speech that comes out about Monday, which is great. You get a little bit of pressers and trash talk during the week, which is great. And then undoubtedly some coach says something off the cuff about Colorado, and you get Deion's response pregame, and then a pregame speech. You get a week's worth of content just pulling for Colorado that doesn't even include how fun the games are. So yeah, they're our team. There's no way we don't gotta skirt around it anymore.
Yeah, we are no longer pulling punches when it comes to that. They are favored by 23 points against Colorado State. That's a game we're going to talk to. Or Maddie, do you just want to talk about it now? You just get a wild card game?
It's a wild card. Put it at the top. Put it right at the top. Put the Buffs where they belong, at the top.
Absolutely. Let's dive right into that Colorado. That was not scripted, by the way. We have a whole rundown, and I went off the cuff right there because I said, you know what? I'm being compelled to talk about Colorado and Colorado State. Matt, as you mentioned, a lot of the attention of this game has been drawn off of the field. Jay Norville taking some shots at Deion. Deion responding. Deion giving all of his players glasses. Awesome move. Sunglasses to wear into. They're hosting that game, I believe, right?
Game day's there. Yeah, and game day's there. It's a whole thing.
They're favored by 23. 23 points. That is a big line. You know how I feel about big lines, but listen, this Colorado team, as if they needed any more motivation, Matthew, going into a rivalry game. Again, back-to-back rivalry games for them with Nebraska, then Colorado State coming into town, the battle for Colorado. That is a 10 p.m. Eastern time kickoff, by the way.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Sorry, Matthew, that it's so late for you, but if you like the after dark stuff, though.
This is perfect for me. I get to watch everything else throughout the day, and then a game that I don't anticipate being overly competitive. Okay, spoiler, I'm going to pick Colorado to even lay the points, right? Colorado State's not good. Jay Norvell, I don't know what he's doing, right? Just let Deion do his thing. Deion's going to manufacture some kind of motivation anyway, but why are you going to poke the bear? Why are you going to give them real motivation by just opening your trap and just talking trash just completely out of nowhere? I don't understand. I'm going to take Colorado because I don't think it's going to be a super close game. That said, like, this is great. That makes it a great end cap, a game that I am invested in because Colorado is the team I'm the most interested in this year. Playing at night in what should be a give me. Your first half is hopefully going to be Shedeur Sanders just launching the ball to literally everybody. Like they had, Jimmy Horn Jr. going off the first week. We know how good Travis Hunter is. Last week, Xavier Weaver was completely uncoverable by the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Like just watching this team throw the ball around the yard as I'm laying in bed, getting ready to fall asleep and get to watch the Buffaloes run up and down Colorado State is going to be a blast.
Be some sweet dreams right there. I was just looking at our friends at DraftKings. They've got props out for that game already. Well, it is a Friday. We're recording this on a Friday before the Saturday slate. I was looking at the anytime touchdown scores. Dylan Edwards is minus 390 to score a touchdown, and Travis Hunter is minus 245. Xavier Weaver, as you mentioned, minus 180. Jimmy Horn Jr. minus 170. Anthony Hankerson is minus 150. Savion Wilkerson is plus 145. So that's your first player. You have got 5 players in minus money to score a touchdown. So they anticipate lots of points to be put up in this game, obviously, as the over-under is 62.5 when you start looking at this game. Maddie, you already spoiled your pick. You're taking it's 24 at DraftKings. I did say 23 earlier. It's 24 at DraftKings is the line favored by Colorado. That game is in Boulder at Folsom Field. Each of Colorado's 6 games against non-con opponents at Folsom Field have hit the underline. Fun fact, that's 62.5, but Colorado State has failed to cover the spread in 8 of its last 9 games against opponents from the Pac-12 conference. I'm taking the Buffs as well, minus 24. I want to root for Deion just to absolutely bury Norvell into the ground. That's kind of what I'm cheering for, and I really do, Maddie, as you mentioned, I think it's going to happen.
I agree. I think it's 100% going to happen. I think there was no need for it. There was absolutely no need for it. I think it's going to happen, and I've seen it. Colorado wants Shedeur Sanders to be at minimum invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. They're going to play him deep in the game, even if they're up. They're going for the stats for Sanders. And I think it's smart, right? He gets invited there. Deion gets to flaunt that around next recruiting cycle. That he had a quarterback at the Heisman Trophy place. I mean, it also helps that he's his son, I'm sure. But they're gonna keep chasing stats even if they're up. So yeah, I think they easily they lay the points. Give me Colorado. I do think they kind of win in a flashy fashion.
Glad we're on the same page. We can get into the schedule, but I want to give a quick little. This game's not on our schedule rundown.
Tough again.
Another off the cuff. I said I saw the rundown that Maddie sent me, and I said absolutely not. I'm not going to follow that. Iowa plays host to, I believe it's Western Michigan, right?
Correct.
I had sent you this bet earlier in the week, Matthew, and I think that this is absolutely insane. Iowa's still a 28.5 point favorite. The last time Iowa scored 28 points in general was last year against Northwestern when they beat them 32-10. That would not have covered a 28 point spread. 29 points, really. They have to beat them by 29 points. That means you have to rely on the Iowa offense to score 29 points. Maddie, you did mention when we were going back and forth about this Western Michigan high-flying air raid attack, they could give Iowa a little bit more opportunities to score. Ooh, more possessions. I don't know, dude.
There's no way that I would take Iowa to cover that.
I mean, I'm taking Western Michigan plus the 28.5 points all day. We don't need to dive into that matchup. I just wanted to throw that out there that is an absolutely insane line. And so this is funny. 28.5 points, right, is the spread. The over-under is 42. So they don't really expect a whole lot of points to be scored in that game, but they expect them to score 29 more points than Western Michigan. What happened to that Western Michigan quarterback that came out like 2 years ago? And he probably shouldn't have came out. Yes.
Ellerby? I think he ended up going to the XFL or something. I don't know. I thought he was kind of fun, but he didn't make it. I also want to say, now that we're talking about Iowa, we're getting sidetracked. Brian Ferentz, his job is on the line. If Iowa doesn't average 25 points per game, it's been confirmed that the bowl game, if they play in one, is included, so that helps a little bit. But I still think he is on pace to be under. And he hasn't even started Big Ten play yet. And we know how hard it is for Iowa to score points in Big Ten play. So this man is coaching literally for his job, and the only thing they have to do is put up 25 points a game. That's still going to be a challenge against Western Michigan. No way I would take them to cover 28 points.
28 points. Now, I want to preface this. Folks in Vegas are a lot smarter than I am, and they probably know something. They're time travelers. They know how all this stuff's going to work out. But I just feel like that is an absolutely asinine line, and you should sprint to DraftKings Sportsbook and take that line like I did. But anyway, Maddie, let's get into the slate. I've put off talking about this game long enough. As number 15 Kansas State travels to Columbia, Missouri to take on the Missouri Tigers. That game is on the SEC network. This game is really interesting too because it's two undefeated teams facing off against each other. One of only, I believe, 5 matchups in week 3 now that featured 2 undefeated teams. But they decided to put this on the SEC network, not ESPN, not one of the main channels. I think that's really interesting and maybe telling of how people feel about this game. But the folks in Vegas feel like this game's going to be pretty close. This Kansas State only has that -4.5 line. We saw it on Thursday, I should say, Matthew. That line dropped all the way to like 3, 2.5 in some places, but now it's back up to 4.5. I think they were trying to get more money on Missouri because when I looked last, I think a lot of the money was on that Kansas State spread. What are your thoughts on this matchup as Kansas State goes to Missouri for the first time, I believe, in like 13 years? I want to say. Yeah.
So I'm confused because LSU and Mississippi State are on ESPN, and like LSU is a bigger draw than Kansas State, Missouri, but like, is that really a better matchup when ESPN kind of has the control? I don't know. I find that interesting that this K-State traveling to Missouri is somehow not as good. And like you said, the line indicates that Vegas thinks it's a close game. It did get bet way down. It got real low when you look on the surface and like you would assume K-State should absolutely win this game, right? They were very competitive last year. They were a better team than Missouri was last year. They went off and won the Big 12. Then they went and played Alabama. And yes, they got smoked. And yes, they lost some talent. But you would anticipate Kansas State being a lot heavier favorite. I think that is why the line has obviously gone back in favor of them. People probably were just as confused as we were, wondering what is going on here and slamming the bets on K-State. But here we are. It's still less than a touchdown. It's less than a touchdown for Missouri to have to cover this. And so I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by this matchup. I don't think either team has been particularly challenged yet so far. Oh, okay, in fact, Missouri did get challenged by Middle Tennessee, but neither team has played a quality opponent as of yet. I think Troy is significantly worse than what they have been in the past. So like, I don't know. I don't know what to make of either team. And I guess that's what Vegas is relying on is, hey, K-State is still going on the road to an SEC opponent in which Missouri's defense does look good. We don't know what they're going to be yet. So we're just going to play it safe here rather than favoring K-State, but what I'm sure most advanced metrics would say.
Yeah, I do the Mizzou show here on KC Sports Network, if you don't know, and I'm a Missouri Tigers fan. So it's hard for me, I think, to kind of look at this game, and especially after the Middle Tennessee game, and feel confident. I can only judge Mizzou on what they've already showed me, right? Like, I think that's kind of the tough part for me is like, do I think they're better than what they showed against Middle Tennessee? Yeah, I do. I think they're a better football team than that. Have I seen that in the first 2 games? No, I haven't. So again, it's the show me state. You got to show me from Missouri. You got to show me the Missouri Tigers a little bit. So I want to talk about like the spread movement a little bit, Maddie, as we kind of talked about already, because it opened up a week and a day ago. I'm looking at DraftKings Sportsbook here at 1 point. There's a 1 point spread, climbed all the way to 2, a few hours later, got all the way up to 3.5, 5 days ago from the time of recording this podcast. 4 days ago, got up to 5.5, as high as 5.5. And then that's when the fall started to happen, down back to 5 to 4.5 to 4 yesterday, and even getting down to 3.5 and 3 in some places. But DraftKings has it now back up to 4 points, which is wildly interesting.
What are we missing, right? Like, just I can come back to is what are we missing? Because K-State should be favored by more. I am sorry, Missouri fans. Like, K-State should definitely be favored by more than 4 points. How did it open at 1? It's okay. Here, I'll build the case for it, right? This is what Missouri has going for it this year. They're throwing the ball to Luther Burden. He has like a 38% target share, and he's the best player taking the field in this football game. He's definitely the best player on the field in this football game for either squad, and he's getting the ball a lot. That's good. Missouri's defense has been good. I actually think Missouri's defense is probably going to make it a little difficult for K-State's offense to move. I know Will Howard's having a phenomenal start to the season. I don't trust K-State's wide receivers to really have their way against Missouri's secondary. I think Missouri's secondary is very good. Jaden Jackson, Phillip Brooks, quality wide receivers for college. I just don't think they are going to have their way with Missouri secondary. That defensive line should have some reps where they win. So I could see it being a low-scoring game, keeping it close, a typical K-State kind of garbage disposal type game. And when Missouri has the best player that they are force-feeding the football, that's how they win, right? They get a couple touchdowns or they get a couple big plays out of Luther Burden. Maybe Eli is sitting there, not going for it on fourth downs, making really bad coaching decisions on fourth downs, trying not to show his hands before this game, and all of a sudden now he unleashes this aggressive nerd coaching style that he likes to present himself as. I don't know. That's the avenue for Missouri that I could see Vegas relying on to think Missouri's going to keep it close. It's just, I don't know. That's all I got.
He has to be more aggressive. I think that was kind of what the biggest takeaway from that Middle Tennessee game is. You're punting. I know you're up 13, but if you score a touchdown, that doesn't matter, right? You can score a touchdown and okay, fine. You're up 13, but you're punting from the opponent's 39-yard line on a 4th and 1. You don't trust your offense enough to get a 4th and 1 against an FBS team, but against a group of 5 team. That was so maddening to me. And Missouri, much like the Kansas City Chiefs, have struggled in short yardage situations when it comes to those 3rd and 4th downs. And I was looking at the percentage of bets placed. This is something you can see on the DraftKings Sportsbook app on your phone, but not on the computer, which I think is interesting. You can see 90% of the money that people have placed on the spread is on Kansas State. So I think that might have been something that Vegas, I don't know, dude. I really don't understand. People are seeing this and saying oh yeah, we're going to hammer Kansas State in this one. It seems like a no-brainer decision. I don't feel wildly confident about this game from a Missouri Tigers perspective. I do think that Kansas State is still a really good football team. I think they're really well coached. I think that they are very disciplined in terms of things. Yeah, they got to clean up some stuff on the offensive line, but they've got a very good, talented offensive line. They've got at least one NFL offensive lineman on that team. Now Missouri does have an NFL offensive lineman in Javon Foster as their left tackle. And they've got some NFL prospects on that defense as well. And I think you're right, Matty. I think you're right on track. Is that the defense? If Missouri's going to be in this game to win it, the defense is going to have to score points. And that's been the Missouri's recipe for the last few years under Eli Drinkwitz, is that the offense has not been good enough, and you got to force feed Luther Burden. You got to get him the ball somehow. I'm sure that the Kansas State defense will be all over Luther Burden. So to seeing a guy like Theo Weiss, Mekhi Miller is questionable for the game, but to see somebody like that step up in and what I assume that Kansas State, the defense is going to say, hey, we want somebody else to beat us besides this Luther Burden cat. And if I was a defensive coordinator, that's what I would be thinking. I was like, okay, let's make Brady Cook beat us. Let's make him beat him with his arm. I would really only send 4 man pressures, maybe get after him every once in a while, but try to make him throw the ball, because trying to make him make some decisions would be in Kansas State's best interest. There's just a lot with this game that I think is a really big game for Eli Drinkwitz. I think it's a really big game for Missouri's program as a whole. And I think this game, maybe for the state of Missouri, and not as the whole state, but the state of the University of Missouri football program, it means a little bit more to than maybe what it would mean to Kansas State. If Kansas State drops this game, I don't think it's that into the world sky is falling. We need to fire Chris Kleiman. If Missouri loses this game, I don't think it's we need to fire Eli Drinkwitz. But I think it's been as close as it's been in a while for Missouri fans losing faith in Eli Drinkwitz after that Middle Tennessee debacle in terms of the decision making, the whole process when it came to picking a quarterback. I think people didn't like the lack of transparency. Which, listen, that's not his job to be super transparent in a quarterback battle. I know that some people took some exceptions to that, but I think that this means a whole lot for this program. That's why I think that I can see Vegas thinking it's going to be close, because it is at home, and that does play a factor. It's going to be it's a big game for Missouri. I think they know that. I think that they know that, and this is the line right here, Matty. We've talked about this. I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. If Missouri beats Kansas State, they can still have a great season, right? They might be able to get to 8 wins if they beat Kansas State and say they play at that level for the rest of the season, right? Because it's so volatile in college football. They play that way to beat Kansas State. They play that way the whole year. They could probably get to 8 wins when you start to look about who else is in the SEC. But if they don't beat Kansas State, even if the game's close, if they don't beat them, I think that they can't have a quote unquote great season. I think that they're capped at like a good season when it comes to that. But I think Kansas State is kind of the barrier of having a good versus great season.
Well, so, I mean, here's the thing: the SEC West is bad potentially.
Yeah, it is bad.
This year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, not bad. Okay, and they still have Alabama and LSU. Both of them just have one loss, and they are to top 5 teams, right? So, like, Alabama and LSU could still be very, very good football teams. I don't want to get too far gone, but Arkansas, Auburn, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, not great, right? And so, like, Missouri has a chance, even if they lose this game, to beat known programs, to beat quality programs in the SEC and still finish with a quality conference record, still finish well. What you can't have if you're Missouri is lose badly. You can't be embarrassed. You can't be run off the field by K-State. That's just what you can't have. If you get run off the field, yeah, things are going to be ugly. If it's a close game and they lose by less than a score or even just by 1 score, I think, especially if it's not just a complete ugly debacle of a football game with everything looking real sloppy for both sides, if it looks like they played relatively well, played K-State tight, whether that's defensively or offensively, I think it's fine. I think you'll find out. I think you'll move on. You'll call it progress and you'll move forward and hope the rest of the season continues to build on that. And then if it doesn't, we have that talk again. As long as it's not ugly, I think Missouri should be okay. It's just K-State has this thing. If you're going to give them the opportunity to run up the score, they will. Like, if you're going to make mistakes, K-State will take advantage of them. So, like, it could be close and then all of a sudden turn into a blowout real fast. Like, Missouri's got to be on their P's and Q's, keep getting the ball to Luther. I don't care if K-State tries to block or cover Luther Burden with 11 guys. You better get him the football if you're Missouri. Like, you better. Defensively, guy that intrigued me. I only was watching the Middle Tennessee game a little bit last week, but Gaddy, I don't know his first name, edge rusher. He was the guy that transferred from Jackson State, right? Came out from Jackson State.
Let the Jets start real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, he looked pretty impressive last week, just a little bit that I was watching. He looked like a guy to keep an eye on. So, like, it's a defensive end. I think he came from Jackson State. The last name was Gaddy or something like that. I got my eye on him. I didn't know a lot about him before, but eyes on him. So I'm just gonna pick the game. We spent a lot of time on K-State, Missouri here. We got other games to get to. That's fine. I'm taking K-State laying the 4.5 because I just think that's too tight. I think it's more likely K-State wins a good football game by 1 touchdown than any other outcome even, right? So, like, give me K-State. I think there's more times you play this game out that K-State wins in comfortably or by just a single touchdown because I just don't trust Missouri not to make a couple mistakes throughout the game.
For sure. I think that's right. I'm also going to take Kansas State minus the 4, laying the points there as well. Niles Gaddy is who you're thinking of. Senior transfer. He was at Jackson State and also Tennessee. So he's been in the SEC before.
He was a SWAC like All-American or something. The name was familiar when I went and like looked it up. I just didn't watch a ton of them going into the year. But yeah, it's a quality player for Dion.
Yeah, shout out Dion again. But listen, I mean, Missouri came into this year like that one position that they really were iffy about was defensive end on the defensive side of the ball. They've had production from the guys that they've got the transfer from, Niles Gaddy. They've got Darius Robinson playing there, Johnny Walker, Joe Moore. DJ Wesselak. So, I mean, they've got guys there that have stepped up. So, yes, Maddie, we did talk a lot about the Missouri game. I had a lot to get off my chest still. But let's talk about South Carolina at number 1 Georgia going between the hedges. Georgia favored by 26.5 points. South Carolina, they're coming off that the week. That was week 1, wasn't it? They played UNC. That wasn't week 0.
Yes, that was week 1.
That was week 1, a game where I think expectations for South Carolina fans probably fell flat. What are your thoughts on this matchup for South Carolina v. Georgia?
This game could get ugly fast. South Carolina's offensive line is one of the worst in all of Power 5 football. Georgia, shockingly, good defensive line. I don't know if you know that, Tuck. They're pretty good up front for Georgia. They're pretty good up there running for Georgia. So I don't know if the Gamecocks can get anything going on the offensive end. I will say this. Spencer Rattler, despite literally being jumped on half a second each place, playing pretty good football. Like, he's playing pretty good right now. Spencer Rattler is kind of carrying over that momentum that he had late last year. I don't know what this game looks like. I get the line. I get why it's there. Could get real ugly real fast, but you have 2 brands here, 2 SEC brands playing. Georgia offensively hasn't looked good. They certainly haven't looked good so far. So if they have an off game, Spencer Rattler dials into whatever he took before that Tennessee game last year, and this offensive line somehow holds up or even a little bit, it could get a little interesting. So like that's how I think it makes the list. You got to at least tune into this game for the first half until Georgia's probably up by 90 and see what it's looking like, just because you never know with the quarterback like Rattler. He can always make a game close if he has the time.
Spencer Rattler is a very interesting case. I almost sometimes I feel like he's like an anomaly from like game to game. Like you legitimately don't know what Spencer Rattler you're going to get. Like you mentioned the Tennessee game. I mean, he's this month. I mean, he's already has 55 completions on 65 attempts, 66
completion percentage.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, like
completing passes. He has 700 yards. Yeah. Like he's doing everything he can. The offensive line is just so bad.
He got it done against Furman. He threw all 3 of his touchdown passes against Furman that he has on the year. But they should get it done against Furman. I think it will maybe a concerning thing when I'm just looking at that score. I obviously didn't watch every second of that game, but seeing it 47-21, if I'm a South Carolina fan, I see Furman put up 21 points on me. I get a little concerned about that defense, especially going against a Georgia offense that has some studs on it. We talk about Brock Bowers. Carson Beck seems to be slinging that thing. Seems to be a pretty decent quarterback for them down there. And obviously, they've got just studs up and down. They got NFL guys up and down that roster on both sides.
No, they do. Like I said, I think Georgia's offense has been a little rickety so far. They haven't been able to run the ball particularly well. It looks like they are struggling with the offensive coordinator turnover. And so maybe for like South Carolina, like TJ Sanders is a defensive tackle, has been playing pretty well for him. Maybe they can get a couple stops, make Georgia, who's going to be seeing, their highest level of talented competition right now against South Carolina, come up. Maybe they get a few stops and they can turn it into a game. And then Rattler's going to find guys like Antoine Juice Wells for South Carolina has barely played because he's been a little dinged up. And they have found that Xavier Leggett is a guy that has stepped up for them in the absence of Wells. And so like they might have 2 wide receivers that can at least challenge Georgia's corners, who again, very good football players. I don't know if you've heard of them, but Georgia also good in the secondary. And so like, maybe there's something there. Now, I got to say this. I believe the last 3 games that Georgia has played South Carolina, they've won by like an average of like 33 points. Yeah. Kirby Smart is putting it on South Carolina. He's especially putting it on Beamer. It seems like there is some kind of bad blood. I don't know if there's a story there that I missed, but it seems like Kirby like sees the line and aggressively attacks it against Shane Beamer right now. And so like that is something to keep an eye on. This might be a game that Kirby really, really wants for some reason.
Looking at the results as you bring them up, recent head-to-head games, last year's game in South Carolina, Georgia beat them 48-7. Last time Georgia was at home against South Carolina, they beat them 40-13. Now, South Carolina did cover in that game because the line was 31.5. Georgia beating South Carolina in 2020, 45-16. And in 2019, it was close, 20-17. South Carolina ended up winning that game. But before that, in 2018, Georgia beat them 41-17. So historically, these games have not been very close, and South Carolina has covered the spread in each of its last 7 road games, Maddie, against AP top 15 teams. So, with South Carolina, 26.5, they're dogs. Georgia, favored by 26.5 points. Maddie, what are you taking?
Give me the fight and rattlesnakes. We're doing it. That's a lot of points. I understand that that's what Georgia's capable of winning by that much. I understand all that stuff. It'll be kind of surprising if this game is close in any way, shape, or form. I just think that there is a little bit of offensive struggles going on with Georgia right now, and I don't know, they're just going to snap their fingers and all of a sudden figure it out against SEC competition. So while Georgia might completely dominate the game defensively, and they might be able to pound the rock and run the ball and do the Georgia thing, I definitely see the talent of Rattler and this South Carolina passing attack getting at least a couple points on the board, making it really hard to cover that much. Yeah, give me South Carolina in this one.
Give me the Dogs. I'll take the points. Anytime I can see the score get run up on South Carolina, I do enjoy it. So I will take that for selfish reasons. But nevertheless, let's get into the night slate game. Another SEC game, Maddie. Is our SEC bias showing with this slate of games? Well, to be fair, if you guys saw the slate of games, you would probably choose all the SEC games too because they stunk. 6 o'clock Central Time, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Number 11 Tennessee travels to the Swamp in Gainesville, Florida. The game will be on ESPN to take on the Florida Gators. Maddie, initial thoughts on this one?
Boy, Tennessee's offense is definitely not just like continued with its stride, right? Going from Hendon Hooker to Joe Milton. And I don't even think that Joe Milton's necessarily played bad. Like, he's not as accurate as Hendon Hooker was, but he's been throwing the right football. Like, he's been throwing it to the right spot, a little inaccurate. Like, he's been okay. It's just the offense seems to be missing a step. And if you want to sit here and tell me that Josh Heupel has kind of been, cruising, not trying to show too much for the first couple weeks before getting this big game in Gainesville, somewhere Tennessee hasn't won in a long, long time, if I remember correctly, going like, yeah, I could buy that. I could buy they're trying to hold stuff down and they're going to hit this game running. Tennessee's still been running the football very well this year. They still have Milton, which probably has the best arm in all of college football, like in terms of just throwing it deep. So, I don't know. It's an interesting spot. And I know Florida fans are a little up after last week. Like, they've convinced themselves that they were competitive against Utah's backups, and that since they won last week, that like they maybe aren't in a bad spot, and maybe they're like on this upward trend. And like, I don't know, man. If it took you a win over McNeese State and then playing Utah's backups to feel good, I think you're in a bad spot. So like, I feel like Florida Gator fans have a little more confidence in their team than I do at this point in time. I think this should be a shellacking, but clearly Vegas doesn't agree with me. So maybe I'm missing something here.
I thought that was interesting too. A 5.5 point line in favor of Tennessee, the number 11th ranked Tennessee Volunteers. But you're right, Maddie. When you start to look back at the historical results of this game, Florida's won the last 2 times they've played in Gainesville at the Swamp and covered. So I think a lot of the time, like in 2019, Florida was favored. Tennessee covered in 2020. 2021, Florida covered. Florida covered last year, that 11.5 points. Tennessee played a lot of weirdly close games last year when it came down to it, that they probably shouldn't have been that close, and then they lost to Spencer Rattler in South Carolina somehow. That was all very weird. But everything you bring up about Joe Milton's a really good point. I think America's infatuation with Joe Milton's arm is kind of funny, because I think there was a play, I don't remember what game it was. He threw the ball a long way, but like overthrew his receiver by like 4 or 5 yards. And people were just like, look at this arm. Like, yeah, that's really cool, but he didn't hit the receiver. And he didn't connect to the receiver. His accuracy
been faster.
Right. Yes. His receiver should have been faster, but his accuracy is certainly something to keep an eye on. But this is a SEC East clash early on in the year. And I'm with you on Florida, not entirely sold on that program as a whole and the direction that they're being taken in. Seems like the coaching isn't necessarily the best, especially when you see Anthony Richardson go into the NFL and look how good, look as good as he did. Now, I think Shane Steichen's a pretty good coach. That's probably for an NFL podcast and not for this year. And I think that, was it Billy Napier? Is that who it is?
Yeah, unfortunately.
I don't know if he properly knows how to use all of his weapons at his.
No, I agree with you. And like, okay, one, it's Graham Mertz at quarterback. It's just, yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
People say that he played okay. He's played okay versus Utah and played okay here. There's, yeah, but I feel like he's protected. I don't want to make this whole thing about trashing Florida. I'm just not feeling it right now. I'm not believing it. I think they did a terrible job using Anthony Richardson. And anytime they took it away from Anthony Richardson, go save us, the offense looked awful. And now it's Graham Mertz instead. And so it's built on the offensive line and running behind Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson. And like, okay, that's cool. That's good. I understand what you're trying to do. But here's the thing. Tennessee's defensive front has been good this year. When Graham Mertz has to drop back to pass, I think he's going to be under pressure. The Volunteers have like 11 sacks on the year so far and like 2 games. Like, this isn't just like they've been getting after the passer. Tyler Barron's a senior there. He's been productive for them the past few seasons. They have James Pierce is an underclassman. I don't even think he's draft eligible, getting after it. Like, they have guys to get after the quarterback. I already don't trust Graham Mertz, and now you're going to put him under pressure throwing to Ricky Pearsall and nobody else. And even Ricky Pearsall, solid college wide receiver. I think he's kind of fast. I don't know if he's a big NFL name guy that's going to make a big impact in the league. So what? I don't know. I think I said it versus Utah. I don't see what this Florida team has to offer other good opponents. I really don't. I struggle to see how this team wins. I struggle to see how they play well in this football game. And I do believe that Josh Heupel has been playing a little possum. I get it. Joe Milton's not the all-world beater that Hendon Hooker is. I've seen Josh Heupel get some pretty bad quarterbacks to look good throughout his time coaching. I think he can get Joe Milton a couple easy scores if he wants to.
It's It's wildly true. Speaking from a guy who was the offensive coordinator of his favorite team for a little bit. Wildly true. Okay, let's pick this game. -6.5 in favor of the Vols, Maddie. Florida's covered their last 2 games at home against, or last 2 September games versus the Vols is what DraftKings Sportsbook said. I don't think that matters. I'm taking Tennessee. I'm hammering. Before I give it to you, I'm taking Tennessee.
I'm all over the Volunteers too. Not close. I mean, the game might be kind of close for a little while. I don't know if it will be or not. I just give me the Volunteers. If they get out ahead at all, if like Florida is reduced to having to drop back and pass like they were versus Utah, different reasons. But like if they have to get back and actually throw the ball, I think unlike Utah, I think Tennessee's going to be able to get even more pressure. Like Utah struggled to get consistent pressure on Graham Mertz. I think Tennessee can if they jump out to an early lead. Like this could be that first time this year where like, whoa, Tennessee's offense is like that good again. So yeah, give me the Vols.
Let's move on to our second wildcard game. Obviously started the top of the show with the wildcard game. Second wildcard game is a matchup that has never happened before, Matthew.
Yeah.
As Minnesota, the Big Ten Gophers, from the Big Ten, which yeesh is right. They looked very pedestrian against Nebraska, a team that got absolutely mollywopped by Colorado.
Our Buffs.
They go to Chapel Hill to take on North Carolina. When we were trying to figure out matchups, like this one caught my attention just because it's so strange of like 2 teams that legitimately have never played before. We'll be facing off against each other. This is a 2:30, 3:30 kickoff, depending on what time zone you're in, 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern in Chapel Hill. That'll be on ESPN. The Heels are favored by 7 points. Maddie, what are your first thoughts on this game?
Talk about clashing styles of football, right? And like, now Phil Longo is no longer in North Carolina. It's still pretty spread out, but they have been trying to run the ball a little bit more this year. So like this was like North Carolina of a couple of years ago when they had they had their 2 running backs there. I'm blanking on their names right now. The one's in Denver and one's with the Jets. Michael Carter and not going to pull the Broncos running back's name right now.
That's fine.
Anywho. They last time they had 2 good running backs. They ran the ball a lot. This team looks like that. They're really kind of riding Omarion Hampton, a guy named British Brooks. Very good runners. They're both averaging over 6 yards per carry. Drake May hasn't been that great so far. And I don't think it's necessarily his fault. I just think they're running the ball a lot more. And it's kind of, I don't think he's struggled. He just hasn't been great. He's got 2 picks, two touchdowns this year, less than 500 yards in 2 games. Like he hasn't been exceptional. But this team is still going to spread out. And then you have the Golden Gophers. They like scored 25 points against Eastern Michigan. Like that's what the Golden Gophers are, right? Like they're just not an offensive team. They're going to make it hard for opponents to score. They're going to be physical. They're going to do the whole Minnesota thing. But like, I don't trust this offense at all. And they're going to have to win the game very, very ugly if they are going to win it. But they are capable of doing that because they're Minnesota, I think.
That's very confident, Maddie. No, it is a very interesting, as you mentioned, 2 very different styles of football. I, hand up, admittedly, did not watch Minnesota's Week 2 game. Who did they play? I don't
Eastern Michigan. They won like 25-6 or something. Like, just a typical Minnesota game that they absolutely dominated, but still only won by like 19 points.
Right. So, I mean, that's the still only won by 19. Yeah, that's the kind of the Big Ten way, right? I mean, you take care of business and you just do the bare minimum you have to win. And I don't know how that'll fare against Drake May and UNC and everything that's going to go. Michael Carter, is that who you're talking about, by the way?
Michael Carter. It's Michael Carter is the one I know, and then the other one, he's the running back for Denver. Very, very good. Got hurt.
Javonte Williams.
There we go. Thank you. Yes, Javonte Williams. I could not pull the name for some reason. I had Michael Carter. Anywho.
We did have Michael. We were all over Michael Carter. I forgot which one you could remember and which one you couldn't remember. But I'm glad we got there. But yeah, when you talk about North Carolina, I think that it could be really interesting when they go up against a Big Ten defense like that, because I don't think they'll see anything like Minnesota for the rest of the year in the ACC. So it could be a really interesting clash of styles there in terms of how Drake May can adjust. And as you mentioned, not off to the blazing start that people expected Drake May to be off to. I don't know if he's even like actually, I guess, I want to ask you this question. Do you think he would get an invite to New York right now? If everything ended right now, do you think he would get an invite to New York for the Heisman?
Oh, yeah. Ooh, for the Heisman here. Okay, I thought you were using invite to New York as like an invite to the draft, but now...
No, for the Heisman.
No, he wouldn't right now. He's not that he's been bad. He just hasn't been great right now. Now, there's some, caveats here. Their wide receiver 1 is not going to get a play at all this year. They brought in Tez Walker. The NCAA has done NCAA stuff and decided he is no longer allowed to play this season because of transfer rules and whatnot. And their wide receiver 2, I think, is just now coming back. So they've kind of been without guys they anticipated having that they practiced with up until the week of the very first game of the year. So that probably plays a role. But I do think what we saw is that Drake May, when it matters, when he had to have drives for South Carolina, he did. When he had to engineer drives against App State to win last week, he did. I think he's still clearly one of the most talented players in all of college football. You mentioned that North Carolina is not going to see a defense kind of like the Golden Gophers and that style. I agree, but the Gophers aren't going to see many offenses like the Tar Heels either. Yes. You get this Big Ten defense, and then all of a sudden you spread it out and make them deal with speed and space. They hate that. They don't know what they've gotten themselves into, right? It's I think it's almost a harder matchup for Minnesota to try to match that. Their hope here is they're physical. They got a big offensive line. They want to run the ball. They're going to try to tuck in and push around this North Carolina defensive line, which has been playing better this year. I looked it up. North Carolina has 2 5-stars, 4 4-stars, and 2 or 3 more 3-stars on their defense, just their defensive line. Their defensive line is loaded with talent that have been underachieving. And finally this year, they're starting to put a little bit, I don't want to say a lot, but a little bit together, right? And so you kind of want to see what that plays out like. But that's Minnesota's hope. They can push around this D-line. What's been considered a soft defense in the past of North Carolina gets pushed around and they can run the ball around. It's just, I'm going to just go ahead and take it here. I'm taking North Carolina land a touchdown because I think there's too much space. I think that offense is going to be too good for what the Gophers have going on. Nebraska's defense clearly isn't that good, and Minnesota couldn't do a thing against them. So, give me the Tar Heels to cover.
Underdog has covered the spread in each of Minnesota's last 5 games. I don't think that matters in this one, though. As you mentioned, touchdown spread in this one. I'm going to take North Carolina as well. Give me the Heels. And that's going to do it for the wildcard games. That's going to do it for our slate. But this week, we have our Sickos game of the week, as we do usually always. The Sickos game of the week. It's a good one. It's one that I have a little bit of personal bias in, probably. Now, this isn't technically the Sickos game of the week. Obviously, if you know the show, if you're listening to the show, I hope you know about the Sickos Committee Twitter page. It's got grown into a little bit more than just a Twitter account. They've got a Substack. They've got all kinds of stuff there. They've got articles. They've got people who do great coverage and great work for them at the Sickos Committee on Twitter. Go follow them, or X, whatever you want to call it. But the Sickos game of the week this week for them, for the Sickos Committee, is actually Syracuse. I believe it's at Purdue, right? I believe it's in West Lafayette. But the game that we're picking for the Sickos game of the week, it's a backyard brawl, baby. It's going to be on ABC. It's Pittsburgh at West Virginia. The Panthers are heading to the Sticks to take on West Virginia, who is favored by 2.5 points in this matchup. Rivalry game, Maddie. This game kicks off at 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern time. I'm not gonna draw out my pick here. Hammer West Virginia. Bitter frauds. You know what they say in West Virginia, Sweet Caroline. If you don't look it up, that's what I'm gonna say. But this is a family-friendly podcast, so I'm not gonna say it. We're taking West Virginia and the Mountaineers. I'll be glued to that game.
I picked this game specifically for Tuck because he does have a disdain for the Pitt Panthers.
I don't know why. Them. I really don't know why.
Because it's a terrible brand of football that belongs only in the Big Ten, but somehow it's even worse because their head coach actively seeks out a way to destroy offense rather than just letting a lack of offense come to him.
Actually, yeah, you're right. I do know why.
That's 100% it. Yeah. This man Narduzzi sat here. He watched Boston College's offense under Phil Jurkovich and said, I need that QB and his offensive coordinator to come to me, but I'm not going to get a Zay Flowers to go along with it. And we're definitely going to make this work. And it worked so well that they got bopped by the Cincinnati Bearcats last week. And that's the problem for Pitt. They got pushed around and beat up by the Cincinnati Bearcats, who lost Luke Fickell and a ton of guys that he brought in that style of play. You want to say the Bearcats beat Pitt and pushed them around under Fickell with what he had done there with his recruiting? Sure, but they bring in Scott Satterfield and they still do that to you when you're the Pittsburgh Panthers? That's a tough look. You look through this Pitt, like they usually, pride themselves on an offensive line, a defensive line, and the run game. It looks like it's a down year for all of the above for Pitt right now. And then they don't have an offensive coordinator or quarterback that can make it up for them. So, I get it. I get the Mountaineers pick. They know what they have. They have a run game with C.J. Donaldson, and they're going to rely on it. And they do have a good offensive line. Their center is actually very good for West Virginia. I have no idea what his name is because I haven't quite looked at the interior offensive lineman, but their center, watching them against Penn State, is a good player, right? And so they have something going for them. That all said, give me Pitt on the bounce back just because I want to oppose Tuck, because I want to go against them. This is an anti-my heart pick. I hate this with every ounce of my soul, my heart, and my gut, but I'm taking Pitt on the bounce back. Unfortunately, as much as I despise Narduzzi for what he has done to set offensive playing back decades there in Pittsburgh, he's a good coach, and somehow he doesn't lose a lot of games. So, give me Pitt to go into West Virginia and come out of the backyard brawl on top.
Just absolute Neil Brown erasure right there in terms of good coaching.
Hey, Neil Brown's off the hot seat. This man entered the season as one of the hot coaches on the hottest of seats, and part of it's because West Virginia is, struggling with money and maybe doesn't want to pay to get rid of him, but he is safe. He is comfortably safe as the head coach of West Virginia, no matter what, even if Pittsburgh dominates them and wins by 3 points, because that's what a Pittsburgh domination looks like. He is safe.
That's fair. You're talking about Zach Frazier, I assume. The number 554 for West.
Yes,
West
54.
Virginia.
Yes, yeah.
Listen,
Didn't look up any names.
You're gonna love this. A West Virginia kid from Fairmont, West Virginia, going to West.
Oh, getting revenge. He's coming back home.
I mean,
sweet home West Virginia for Frazier.
I'm looking at his his mugshot. That's not right. Headshot for on the roster.
Sure.
He's got a good neck beard, and he looks like a West Virginia offensive lineman. Just a bunch of lumberjacks up in West Virginia. But yeah, so West Virginia, hammer that one. That's a stone cold lock, whatever you want to call it, lead pipe. I don't care. Put the mortgage on it. Who cares? West Virginia -2.5. Maddie, that's gonna do it. You have any final thoughts on this week's slate?
Yeah, Pitt's got this. Panthers are coming home. Panthers are taking it.
Frauds. They're frauds.
Go Buffs.
That's going to do it for this week's edition of Barely Bowl Eligible. Hey, I think we're going to go live. Let's make this announcement now, Maddie. I think from now on, Barely Bowl Eligible will be a live show on this here YouTube channel. We're going to go live over the noon Central hour, barring any changes. Noon Central. Probably go for about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. We'll interact with some of you guys as we go live, talk about some college football. It's a good way to kick off your Friday. If you don't have a whole lot going on your Friday, maybe over your lunch hour, we can hang out with you guys, talk some college ball. As many that I do like to do every Friday. We usually record around that time anyway, so it's hey, how do we go live, hang out with the people? So check out that next week, and make sure to be a friend. Tell a friend, as Pat McAfee would say, about Barely Bowl Eligible and the Always Draft Season channel. We have a lot of draft content coming for you guys from us at KCSN. Up on this channel here. So if you subscribe now, you'll be way ahead of the game in terms of our draft content that we're going to be putting out. A lot of content on this channel. So that's going to do it for Matt Lane, for Tucker Franklin. For Matt Lane, I'm Tucker Franklin. That's going to do it for Barely Bowl Eligible. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Catch us live next week at 12 Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you then.